before I get into QC Copper and explain to you all the reasons why you should become investors in our great company, I'm going to give a quick plug to a couple other companies who are here today as a part of our group. While I'm the CEO of QC Copper, I'm also the chairman of the OR Group, and you're going to hear from the likes of James Sykes just after me. He's going to talk about his nickel project in Manitoba. And then later on this afternoon, you got Tony Moreau, who just made a great discovery with American Eagle later this afternoon. So those are two companies coming up. But it really just speaks to people, which I think is the most important thing in this industry. And if that's one takeaway you get here is invest in good people, and good people tend to invest in good projects. We're a very risky business, and you can mitigate that risk by investing with good people, and again, they're good projects. They tend to be good fiduciaries, and I think that's what our broader group represents. So take note of that. Now, QC Copper, as Anthony said, we've got a very large maiden resource. Came out about a year ago. It was really been a whirlwind since we got that 2 billion pound pit-constrained resource published. Very high grade. It's almost 0.9% copper equivalent, right in the heart of Quebec. And to sort of put some context around it, the 𝐤𝐤𝐤𝐞 was, and I said that the title slide is reinventing a legendary mine. And the 𝐤𝐤𝐤𝐞 really was a legendary mine. It operated for 50 years by Falconbridge. It produced 1.6 billion pounds of copper and over 1 million ounces of gold from 4 high-grade underground mines. And I put this slide up here to reference 2 other really well-known Canadian stories that had the exact same strategy as us, and that's, of course, Detour and Canadian Malartic. And I think you're going to hear from Mr. Sean Boyd, who owns both of these mines now at Agnico. But there was a time when nobody believed that Detour or Malartic could be reinterpreted into a bulk tonnage near-surface deposit. And that's the stage that 𝐤𝐤𝐤𝐞 and QC Copper is in right now. They don't believe us, but they will. And so that's coming. What we've done since the publication of that 2 billion pound resource is we continue to drill it out. We raised a bunch of money, and we're in the midst of a 60,000 meter drill program. Just trying to flip the slides here. 60,000 meter drill program to upgrade it. And that's all going to be culminated by our updated mineral resource estimate that's coming out in 2023. One of the key considerations when you're developing any base metal project is, are you big enough? And we are. The distinction about 𝐤𝐤𝐤𝐞 is that it's not a porphyry deposit, it's not a VMS deposit, so people just don't understand it. It's sort of like an orogenic deposit that just happens to be disseminated, meaning there's lots of copper mineralization outside of the veins that were once mined. The hanging in the footwall carry mineralization. And according to the Mining Journal, we are the 3rd highest grade copper deposit in the Americas, and we're in the top 20 in terms of size. So we are big enough. As the resource is defined today, it's a multi-decade life of mine. But we think that this 𝐤𝐤𝐤𝐞, and as well as the Chibougamau district at large, has multi-generational potential. When you look at Detour, you look at 𝐤𝐤𝐤𝐝, they have grown. I mean, 𝐤𝐤𝐤𝐝, Malartic is just developing the Odyssey. So we see literally generational opportunity here for a very large scale mine. This whole area has never really been interpreted as a bulk tonnage area. This is what the deposit looks like. What you see here in gold, that's all of the mineralization defined by both Falconbridge's data, which is a huge database, as well as ours. We've drilled, well, by the end of this year, we'll probably have drilled a total of about 80,000 meters. And as you can see, there's a pit constraint there. That's where the 2 billion pounds of copper is, but there's lots more there. And that's what we've been doing ever since we published that resources, both infill drilling and to increase the confidence in the lower grade material, but also capturing some of this other material that you see in gold that's not included in our 43-101. So it's early days in the 𝐤𝐤𝐤𝐞, and we think this 2 billion pounds of 0.9% copper equivalent is going to get larger. Struggling with my button there. There we go. Okay. Part of our program is, I guess what we say is we're drilling waste into ore. So this maiden resource didn't include a lot or enough of this disseminated material. So that's what we've been doing since, is focused on drilling the I guess the areas distal from the veins to the infill, and you can see we're getting really good results this past year. You know, wide intersections of anything above 0.2% copper equivalent is economic grade, and we're drilling 100-meter intersections, and this is right from surface. So this is really economic stuff, and that's what investors can expect from us, is to increase the contained metal in this project from the 2 billion pounds of copper. What's it going to be? Well, that's the billion-dollar question, is how big can we get it? But the grade will probably come down a little bit, but we're going to keep it very high grade, certainly relative to the competitive projects out there, which is like a copper porphyry. This is what it looks like in terms of size. Again, I'll reference, it's about 1.6 by 1.2 kilometers. It's big, and part of it goes deep. It's going to get deeper on the eastern side there, as you can sort of see in the cross-section. What this slide is meant to represent, though, is the starter pit. And the starter pit, one of the unique elements of this mine is that it has a crown pillar. And the crown pillar there is where you see in the big red blob, that's where the mill used to be. And the crown pillar is a ceiling of an underground mine. And the benefit of that is that we have these veins. There's the virgin high-grade veins are still there, in addition to the bulk tonnage material. So the payback on this is going to be quite beneficial when we do get to the economics. So the starter pit area is going to be probably about 2 years worth of mine life, but we've got 11 million tons at 1.25%, and the strip is very, very low. Okay, very, very low on this, and I think, I mean, that starter pit alone is a mine in and of itself. When you think about it, 10 million tons at 1.25%, that's very high grade. That is going to pay back our capital when we do shift to economics, and we will shift to economics after we put out this updated mineral resource. Metallurgy, I think everybody needs to really be cognizant of metallurgy in any project. It can kill any project quickly. And the Opemiska is unique. Again, it's got a lot of unique features. It's unique in the sense we have 50 years of mine-level metallurgy. So it's not metallurgy done in a lab. This is real metallurgy. You can see the copper recovery is up in the 95%, gold up in the 90% towards the end of the year. So that's excellent metallurgy. We're certainly updating the metallurgy because now we're bulk tonnage. This is metallurgy based off high grade, so there's work to be done, but there's no deleterious elements. It produces a very clean concentrate that is going to be sold to the Horn smelter, which is just west of us. This is a slide. I got 2 slides showing the project, but this one is really about indicating this is just the beginning. The Opemiska was 4 mines, as I said. We've only focused on or published information on 2 out of the 4 old mines, the Springer and the Perry on the western side of the project. So when you see that pit, when you saw that gold mineralization there, that's just the Springer and the Perry. We've got a 3rd and a 4th mine, which are just, you know, across the street, called the Robitaille and the Cook, which we have the data for. There's an exceptional amount of data on it, but we have not approached it or drilled it in a systematic way. So again, QC Copper is just at the early stages of redefining this Chibougamau district in terms of open pittable material. Beyond what we know, so these well-defined targets, there are other deposits in the area, some of which we own, some of which we do not. But it tends to get more into the VMS, and won't get too technical, but there's a lot of well-defined targets on this project, which we will focus on in parallel once we put the Springer and the Perry into the economic zone. We also own a project called the Ledin project, which is, when I say we, a sister company, Mustango, owns. This is more of a grassroots project, but keep your eye on it. We're drilling really long intersections of copper mineralization. This drill program is going on right now. We didn't buy it in QC Copper because it's grassroots, but the ore group as a whole has been investing quite heavily in Quebec, quite heavily in the Chibougamau district. We really think it's going to be reinterpreted as a world-class copper-gold district, again, open pit. This is what it looks like from pulling back a little bit. You can see our project on the west-hand side there. This is the Chibougamau district. It's very, very well known in Canada, of course. This is where most of the copper came out of eastern Canada through the 20th century. We think this century is going to be quite similar, certainly in eastern Canada. There's probably a dozen mines that are not owned by us, but it just shows that the whole area is totally mineralized. It's very, very fertile there. And so it's really an interesting area. We own another project called the Roger. It's up to the northeast. It's 500,000 ounces of gold. We don't really talk about it, but it's on the rail, and we think it could be a very strategic satellite-type deposit. So there's other projects that we think, if once you can sort of put a mill at the Springer and the Perry, where it's going to be a very large-sized mill, this whole area will open up in terms of resource and ore that can be shipped. Also want to point out the infrastructure. Again, something that's absolutely critical for base metals is, do you have a rail? Do you have power? Well, yes, we do. We have the Canadian Rail. Runs right through our project. Paved highway, local workforce, sophisticated First Nations, the Cree, been our partners. We got clean, green, hydroelectric power, cheapest power in North America. It's 5 cents a kilowatt hour. So this project will be, quote unquote, green to produce that green metal, which is the red metal. Finally, as I wrap up, I'm going to keep to my time allotment here, but I'll just point out again, I said people don't believe us, and that's true, and it's evidenced by our market cap. You can get 2 billion pounds of copper with a company that has $10 million in cash, has 11 million shares of baseload energy, which made a grassroots discovery this year, all for virtually, for nothing. That's just the circumstances of the market right now. We're a 16-cent stock. We are the same price that we are before we released our resource of 2 billion pounds of copper. That's where we are in the market. That's the opportunity. A little bit of patience is required. There's no question about that. We don't know when things are going to change, but we have a major catalyst on the horizon with our 43-101 based off an additional 60,000 meters coming out in hopefully the early part of 2023. So please stay tuned, and I'm happy to answer any questions now or anytime throughout the day.
Well, we do have a couple minutes, which is great. So if there are questions, there's microphones here. I do have one to get it going a bit, Stephen. I mean, you touched upon the community side of it. You're in a brownfields location, so there is ostensibly labor. You touched upon it. There's some labor there. So and you touched upon the First Nations, the Cree, which for non-Canadians, Cree in Quebec have probably the best reputation in terms of working with mining companies. So that's a fact. But give us a little more detail on that. Someone wants to come in here and get this mine built, likely be an acquirer in all probability. How much, I mean, this labor force was there a long time ago. How much labor force remains? Is it sufficient enough to get a mine back up and running again?
Well, first, let me comment on the acquirer. Yes, we certainly intend this will be acquired at some point in time. We're not looking to be bought out today. There's just no value that has been created, but that's going to come. And we do think that this asset will be very valuable. A big, large copper deposit in Quebec is going to be extremely valuable in the coming years. In terms of labor force, you're absolutely right. The Cree in Quebec are amongst the most sophisticated First Nations in Canada. It's a pleasure dealing with them. The local groups are the ojibwe and the Waswanipi. They're our partners. They do our drilling. They do all sorts of services for us. And they are very motivated. In addition to that, there's the town of 𝐵𝐵𝐵. And the town of 𝐵𝐵𝐵 is, we're very proximate to it. And that has benefits and challenges, but the town of 𝐵𝐵𝐵 was created for the 𝐵𝐵𝐵. And if you go to our website, 𝐾𝐨copper.com, you'll see the mayor and the councillors talking about how the town wants this mine. They need the jobs. It's definitely diminished. The mine shut down in 1991. And since then, the children have left because there's not really a lot of reason to stay there. And so I think the townspeople want to give industry back to the town so that their children can stay and there's a future. So to answer your question, no, I don't think the labor force is there today, but I think that the labor force is certainly there in Quebec, and there's certainly a desire for people to work there. And in terms of when they do come back, when this mine is built, there is the infrastructure there. There is a town of 𝐵𝐵𝐵, there's a town of Chibougamau, which is much larger and about 25 kilometers away. So we think that the labor force is both sophisticated and there when needed.
Excellent. Yeah, some significant advantages being in a brownfield area. That's great. Excellent.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Stephen.